Welcome to Meet the Gaffer. I'm Ivan Verlaan, and I'm a cinematographer and colorist based here in Toronto and New York. Now, you might be wondering, why is a cinematographer on a Gaffer's channel? And where is our beloved Luke Seerveld? Well, we thought it would be a good idea to share some breakdowns from a different perspective. You see, my work can fall into two categories. Largely, I'm doing commercial work where I'm working with a crew of people, including a Gaffer and grip team, or I'm doing a lot of documentaries and indie projects where it's just me and maybe one or two other crew members. So, both by necessity and great interest, I find myself working very hands-on with lighting. And I think that's a valuable thing to share with folks given where our industry is going. We're sort of bifurcating into these high-budget or low-budget productions. Now, wherever you land on that spectrum, the core ideas and techniques are largely universal. But the fixtures and the actual execution, how you use them, they're going to change based on the budget and the time constraints. Today, I'm going to break down the interviews from a feature documentary I shot called Band Geeks. The film follows a teenage marching band from small-town Canada as they prepare to march in the Rose Parade. Band Geeks was commissioned by our national broadcaster CBC, so we had some budget to work with. But we had to be very careful with that budget because we were following 4 to 6 characters over a period of about 6 months. So we had to keep each day quite small. Here's how we made it happen.
First up, we're going to look at the interview with Rob, the managing director of the band. Here are a couple clips.
It's very, very unique. I mean, there's not a lot of marching bands in Canada, very, very few. We do everything from parades, field shows, to TV, movie shoots, you name it, we do it. We have 2 criteria to belong to the band, and that is be between 13 and 21 and want to belong. That's it.
All right, so now let's look at some still frames from those clips. We have the tight angle here and the wide angle here. The crew for all of our interview days was myself as the cinematographer, a second camera operator who would help me set up the lighting, and the sound recordist. Most of our interviews were shot with the Canon Cineprimes. The 24mm was typically used for the wide. And I was really going for a more interesting wide angle that center framed the subject's face, giving us lots and lots of headroom here. It's important for the rooms to tell a part of the story and to actually show what the character is like. This office wasn't staged by us in any way. This is Rob's genuine office, and it reflects the sort of organized chaos of a marching band with more than 200 kids in it. So you can see there's a big soft source coming from the right-hand side, and the lighting is motivated by this practical here. This practical fixture here had LED sources in it originally. We swapped that out for 25-watt tungsten just so that we would get some reflection here on the wall, but it's not actually doing much on Rob here. Now, the second really important principle for us was that the light falling on our subject would be flattering. We knew that we were filming a teen marching band, which means that we're probably dealing with some skin issues, which we knew we would want to mitigate using flattering light sources. So as you can see, there is still shape to Rob's face here, but it's a lower contrast ratio, and the fall off between the light and the dark areas is actually quite soft. Moving into the tight angle, you can see that fall off a little bit better here. There is still shape on the shadow side, but the light is sort of frontal 3/4 and quite soft. Almost all of our tight angles were shot on the Canon Cinema 85mm prime at T2. Now let's have a look at a behind-the-scenes photo so we can see the setup. This shot was taken on the last setup that we did with Rob. It is not the same day as the sample, so you will notice that, for example, the lens here is different. On some interview setups, we were using the Ingenue EZ1 at 30mm for the wide as a stand-in. Okay, so let's have a look at the lighting fixtures. This is our key light here. It's a booklight setup based around a digital Sputnik DS6 unit. So this DS6 is shooting away from the subject and bouncing into a Matthews 6x6 Ultra Bounce. That Ultra Bounce is softening the hard light coming from the DS6 and then bouncing back towards a Westcott 8x8 3/4 diffusion. This 8x8 frame is throwing light all over the room that's really nice and soft and flattering, but that also means it's going to get on the wall. So we're using some 6x2 floppies to keep that light off of the wall here. One other interesting thing to note is all of these frames in the background here, these are real glass picture frames. So when we first set up the light, we were noticing a lot of light being bounced back at the camera by these things. A nice little tip is to take some paper tape, crumple it up, and then push it in behind the frames just to lift this near edge, angling the glass away from your lens. Next up is the interview that I shot with Quinn, the sousaphone player. Here's a clip from the film.
My grandpa played tuba and sousaphone like me. My granddad loves watching the band. He loves seeing me and my siblings. I'm really excited for the tour. The only thing that's really making me nervous is for the Rose Parade.
You'll see in a second that this room was definitely one of the smallest that we shot in. Due to the size of the room, we shot the tight angle on the Canon Cinema Prime 50mm at T2. Now, the interesting thing with this room is we have this big window in the background here. Wherever possible, I'm going to schedule the day around the sun. Unfortunately, on this day, we really had no choice but to film this interview right when the sun was going down. That would have meant huge lighting shifts coming through this big window. And given the constraints of the room, this really was the best frame to work with. So we borrowed her dad's ladder and went 30 feet up in the air on the roof and taped down a black Duve solid to the outside. That let us roll for the hour and a half that we needed for this interview with absolutely no shift in lights. Now flipping over to the wide, we have practical lamps here and here motivating the lighting that you see. Both of these fixtures had 25-watt tungsten bulbs swapped in. This light here that's falling on the curtain, motivated by the practical, is actually an RE 150-watt Fresnel. The key is again a book light, creating this nice frontal 3/4 soft fall off here, and lighting this bookcase and the toys up here is a 1x1 tungsten panel with some diffusion on it. Given that I wasn't really planning on making a video out of this, I don't really have many behind the scenes photos of this particular shot, but I did take a couple of videos that I posted to my Instagram at the time. So let's have a look through that. Here's our best look at the lighting setup. Our key light is a book light created with a DMG Lumiere mini switch set to tungsten mode, along with the classic RE650 Fresnel, both bouncing into our white closet door. That in turn is being softened by an 8x8 Westcott 3/4 diffusion, and that's just clamped to a couple of C-stands rather than using a frame in the small space. So as we pan over, we see here in the background our Westcott 1x1 tungsten panel with diffusion. And let's flip over to the other angle. Here's a close look at the Westcott panel. I believe they call this one the X frame. It's got this easy clamp or stand adapter here that's super easy to clamp to things. The light itself is so lightweight that you can just tape it to walls or ceilings if you need to. Okay, panning back across, any grips are going to have a minor heart attack here, but we really only had room for 3 stands. So we have our first C-stand here, which is holding the boom pole. Then on our next stand, we have a super clamp holding the RE150 and a super clamp with a Manfrotto arm that's going to stretch that flag out to full width. And last but not least, at the top of that C-stand, we have the gobo arm coming out to hold our diffusion. Jumping over to the cameras, you can see things were so tight we didn't have room for another tripod. Just, I think that's probably a half apple, maybe full apple, a sandbag, and the camera got rested on that. All right, that's it for Quinn's setup. Next up, we've got Dylan's interview setup. Here's a couple quick clips.
Snare drums are kind of like the face of the drum line. Like, they're usually at the front. Sometimes I do put pressure on myself. Like, I want to live up to that standard sometimes.
And having a look at the stills. And here again, we're back to the Canon 85mm at T2. We always made sure to get a relatively safe, traditional tight angle, because when we're as wide as we are on the wide angles, we really want to be able to cut to a nice close-up where we can see the emotions on the kids' faces. So definitely some shape to the face, but nice soft fall off to that shadow side. Then looking at the wide here, we want to make sure that light is always motivated by something in frame with a practical or a window. And again, that practical was swapped out with a 25-watt tungsten bulb. I wanted to keep our scratch pretty subtle and soft. This backdrop here, we wanted just a little bit of punch. There's some practical candles that flicker, and we needed just a little something getting picked up by the vases here. That's an RE 150-watt Fresnel. This is our key light setup here. We have the Digital Sputnik DS6. That's bouncing here into a 6x Ultra Bounce, and then that is diffusing and bouncing the light back at this 3/4 Westcott 8x8. Now, we didn't quite have enough room to use full frames, so the 6x is effectively maybe a 5x4, and same for the 8x. We're probably using maybe a 6x4 section of it. You can also start to see here a lot of the flags that we're using to keep the light off the walls, the couch, and Dylan's legs. And here's a reverse angle. I apologize for the potato quality of my camera phone. You can see all the flags in here controlling that light, stopping it from falling all over the couch here. This RE150 is the one shooting up towards the mantle, and this mini switch here is our scratch. Now, I tend to use this technique a fair bit. I think it's called ghosting, where you drape a fabric right over the fixture. These fixtures don't run very hot at all, so this has been totally safe for me in the past. This looks like it's actually a Westcott 8x fabric which has been folded over. So this is a quarter diffusion folded over itself to create what would be basically a full diffusion. When you ghost a fixture like this, not only are you softening it, but you're also spreading that light right down, and you're making the surface area longer with an interesting fall off to it. So the source will obviously be lighter here, but as you go a little bit lower, you're getting a bit less and less and less light. Okay, well, that's it for Dylan and for these interview setups. Hopefully this has been of some help, showing how you can apply the same aesthetic ideas across 3 pretty different rooms. You know, you decide at the outset that you want soft, flattering light from a book light, but then how do you actually go about executing that based on the constraints of the room and your day's schedule?
Band Geeks premiered last year on CBC and has since gone on to a great run on the festival circuit. That run is just about done now, so you have one more chance to see it this upcoming February at the Beaufort International Film Festival, or if you're in Canada, it's available on the GEM streaming platform. I would really like to thank Morgan Elliott, the producer and director of this film, for sharing some of these behind-the-scenes photos with us, and most importantly, letting us share the final pieces on screen. Thank you very much, Morgan. Last but not least, I really want to thank Luke Seerveld for hosting me here on his channel. All right, well, that's all for this week. We'll see you again next time.
So I just want to throw this out there. If you've got a shoot coming up that you think is going to be pretty cool, or maybe you've been on a shoot that you've got awesome BTS and you'd like to share some kind of neat rig, or the hurdles you had to get over to, produce the image that you got, if you have access to the final footage, even if you don't, and you don't want to build up your own YouTube channel just to get going on it, pitch me on it. So we can do something like Ivan's done, and you just keep the conversation going. I think it's a great opportunity for us to share not only what's done in different places in the US, because we do things differently often, but around the world. Why not? Hey, let's make 2020 the sharing year. All right.